All right.
Yes, you're up here.
We'll go ahead and get started. We're going to play the Chinese fire drill here to swap seats and let Kathy drive.
You might tell them to mute their mics.
And if you could, there's an open mic out there somewhere. If you could please mute the mic, I'd greatly appreciate it.
Questions. Right.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Kathy Martinez-Fraser, and I am the research manager at the Texas School Safety Center, which is actually located at Texas State University in San Marcos. Just to kind of inform you a little bit about the center is tasked with, in Chapter 37 of the Texas Education Code, with key school safety initiatives and mandates include planning, training, and drilling. The center serves as the central location for dissemination of safety and security information, which includes research, training, and technical assistance to K-12 schools, as well as junior college districts throughout the rest of the state. So I kind of wanted to start our discussion today going through the mandates regarding the safety and security audit, and address some of the misconceptions surrounding them and clarify some of those misconceptions, and then speak to the VAR report as well. Okay, so under Chapter 37-108, each district is mandated to adopt and implement a multi-hazard emergency operations plan for use in their district's facilities. This plan must address the 4 phases of emergency management, which include mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. So this plan must provide for the following. It must provide for district employee training in responding to an emergency. It also must provide for, if the plan applies to a school district, mandatory drills and exercises to prepare districts, students, and employees for responding to an emergency. Just one moment here. We're trying to make sure that you guys have access to the PowerPoint.
What's the matter?
And also, the plan must provide for measures to ensure coordination with the Department of State Health Services and local emergency management agencies.
I don't have control of the screen.
Law enforcement, health departments, and the fire departments.
I could change it to me and see if I can.
Also, the plan must provide for the implementation of safety and security audit.
Yes, we have.
Now, at least once every 3 years, each school district or public junior college district shall conduct a safety and security audit of their district's facility. Now, to the extent possible, the district shall follow safety and security audit procedures that are developed by the center or a comparable public or private entity. So, with that said, a school district or public junior college district shall report the results of their security audit to the district board of trustees, as well as to the Texas School Safety Board. Now, some of the things I would like to address are some of the misconceptions about the safety and security audit process that we have addressed, or that we have dealt with schools asking us questions in the past few years to kind of clarify some of these issues. Now, one of those first misconceptions is that audits must be conducted using an outside or neutral consulting group. And when you typically think of doing an audit, you don't think of auditing yourself. But in this case, the model procedures that were developed by the Texas School Safety Center are for the district to conduct a self-assessment using a team of
nobody can hear
and our resources. So when I talk about audit, I'll use that interchangeably with self-assessment. Another misconception is that audits are a one-time event within the audit cycle. Audit or self-assessment should be an ongoing process so that safety and security needs are improved as they are needed and are discovered, as opposed to waiting for a one-time opportunity to conduct an audit. So that's something to keep in mind. Also, individuals must be trained or certified to conduct an audit or self-assessment. This is another misconception that I would like to clarify today. There is no specific training required for individuals to conduct or participate in a district safety and security audit or self-assessment of their district facilities. So there is no recognized certification as a safety and security auditor. And we've got a lot of questions from districts wanting to clarify that. So I just wanted to clarify or time as close to normal operation as possible. So without the presence of students and doors that may not be in a normal or usual locked or unlocked position, it would be sort of, it would make it more difficult to make an accurate assessment of safety and security or identify any deficiencies that need to be remedied. So in 2009, each school district was mandated to establish a safety and security committee in accordance with guidelines that were developed by the Texas School Safety Center. Just to kind of overview what some of these responsibilities and roles of the Safety and Security Committee are is one, they are to participate on behalf of the district in developing and implementing emergency plans consistent with the district multi-hazard EOP. And this helps to ensure that the plans reflect specific campus, facility, or support service needs. Secondly, they're also to provide the district with any campus, facility, or support services information required in connection with a safety and security audit, a safety and security audit report, which we'll discuss a little bit later, and any other report required to be submitted to the Texas School Safety Center. And last, one of the responsibilities of this particular committee is to review each report that's required to be submitted by the district to the center and to ensure that all reports contain accurate and complete information regarding each campus, each facility, or support service in accordance with criteria established by the center. So some of these guidelines or who should actually be on this committee could include principals, teachers, school counselors, nurses, custodial staff, or any other school personnel that is deemed appropriate by the district. So how can a facility safety and security audit help to make your school safer? Well, first off, this is an opportunity to evaluate access and control policies and procedures within your district. It's also a way to identify areas where unauthorized access is occurring, as well as ways to improve climate and culture. This also is an opportunity to identify unsafe conditions and areas within a facility, as well as inconsistent use of policies and procedures. In addition, it's a time to identify training needs for all staff and students, to make recommendations for improvements, and also to communicate a lot of the safety concerns that you may find during your audits to your administration. So what is the purpose of the self-audit and assessment? Well, first, it's a chance to assess the safety and security of your district facility that you may not otherwise be able to assess if you're not conducting these audits. It's also a way to gather data for use in the district and facility emergency operations plans. It's an opportunity to provide information regarding the safety and security of the district's facilities to the district administration as well as the Board of Trustees. And also in regards to reporting, it's a time to gather certain data for the submission of your audit results to the Texas School Safety Center, which, as many of you know, results in the statewide district audit report. So now I kind of want to discuss a little bit about the reporting process, which is we are actually in the end of the second year of the current audit cycle. We'll begin the last year of the current audit cycle in September. So reporting, the reporting of these audit results will begin next spring. So I think it's a timely, a good time to be speaking to this, as schools will need to be conducting their audits and getting ready to report their audit summaries. So the questionnaire development, I kind of wanted to give a brief history on how the reporting questions were developed initially. In 2007, the initial reporting questions received input from TEA, the Texas Department of Homeland Security, the Safe and Drug-Free Schools Committee members at the time, the Central Texas School Safety Consortium, and the North Texas School Safety Consortium, and the Harris Department of Ed. So it was a collaboration of ESCs, school personnel, and other educational stakeholders that came together to determine what would be a meaningful way to collect this data to gather sort of a statewide snapshot of school safety and security across the state of Texas, and where schools, lied in the area of compliance with a lot of these initiatives. So the questions that we ask in the reporting process have different functions behind them, and one of them is obviously the legislative requirements. So a big bulk of those reporting questions come from Chapter 37 to give us an idea of where schools lie in compliance with Chapter 37-108. Secondly, there are questions that pertain to safety and security practices that schools are conducting, which also gives us an idea of what schools are doing to ensure safety and security in their schools and some of the best practices that are working for them. And lastly, we collect demographic information from districts, which cover cumulative enrollment of districts as well as community type. And these demographic questions help us to sort of analyze the data and determine trends and differences between districts across the state and regionally. So the online DAR tool, it's an online reporting application that was actually created by the Texas School Safety Center, and it's a tool that we will continue to use to collect the data for this report. The reporting of this information is confidential in that it is reported in an aggregate manner. So we don't report this information by district. It's a summary of all of the district's information put together to make up the entire district audit report. Now, the DAR tool allows the center to export data that has been successfully submitted through this process. And what I mean by that is the DAR only includes submissions that have been submitted to us incomplete or with complete data. So any districts that submit data with a lot of missing variables or incomplete questions will not be included in the final analysis. So that's something to keep in mind when the district safety security committee is putting together this report to submit to the center that every aspect of that report is complete and accurate before submitting it to us. So typically, districts have between 6 to 7 months to report their audit information to the Texas School Safety Center. So generally, the reporting questions, along with the glossary, are made available and posted on the Texas School Safety Center website in January of the last audit cycle year. So that's going to be January 2014 of this year. And the reason we do that is so schools can kind of get an idea of, these are what the questions are going to be. You can start preparing for them ahead of time. And we've decided, and we've done that in the past because schools have requested that we do that. The point of contact for the audit reporting process is the superintendent of each district. So with that said, all pre-notification emails, the link to the DAR tool, and the reminders and follow-ups are all filtered through the superintendent. And at that point, it is up to the superintendent to assign a designee to be responsible, if it will not be he or she, to fill out that reporting, online reporting tool. And, the reason why we filter it through the superintendent is because although the person in that position may change, the actual position never does. And so that's our direct point of contact that we always have that's consistent in sending out the DAR tool link. Now, after we post the questions and notify the superintendents, we will send out a pre-notification email letting districts know that the reporting tool will be opening up for schools to begin submitting their audit results with a specific designated date. So come January, we begin to notify districts, and we do our best to keep you up to date so you know when this tool is going to open, so there aren't any sort of surprises. And we call each district and we send monthly email reminders so everyone is aware of the reporting requirement. Now, the DAR has till most recently been made available to districts in April of the last audit cycle year, meaning that we will send an email to each superintendent with a link for them to access the DAR tool. With that said, the DAR tool can only be accessed from that link that we sent to the superintendent. So it can't be accessed from our website. It's a special email that is linked to that specific email account. And that helps protect the confidentiality of that report as well. Now, in the past 2 audit reporting cycles, we have given districts until September 15th of that year, which, like I mentioned before, it's about 6 to 7 months to fill out the questions and submit their data. However, the last 2 reporting cycles we've had, unfortunately, natural disasters that have caused us to push that deadline back. The first audit cycle, it was Hurricane Ike, and most recently was the Bastrop wildfires. So, our goal is to make sure that, we work with the districts that are impacted by these particular incidents to make sure that they are able to complete their audit requirements, because our goal is to have 100% reporting compliance with this mandate.
And Kathy, that'll be September 15th of 2014?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It will be. From April until the day before the deadline to submit, and remember April is when schools will be able to submit their audit information, the Texas School Safety Center, as I mentioned before, will send out monthly email reminders to those districts who have not submitted at that point in time. And in August of that year, which this reporting cycle will be August 2014, we will call each district superintendent that has not submitted at that particular point in time to remind them of their reporting requirements. So the Texas School Safety Center tries to be very diligent in making sure that each district is aware of the reporting requirement, as I said before, because our goal is to get 100% compliance. So with that said, I would like to take this time to kind of speak to actually what that compliance actually means. There's 2 levels of compliance that we speak of here. And one is the compliance, the actual compliance with Chapter 37 that districts must meet, which is, conducting your audits, having an EOP, establishing a school safety and security committee. And then there's compliance and reporting that information to the Texas School Safety Center, which may involve some of these and other safety and security components. Now, for example, if your district goes online to the DIR tool, answers the questions, and submits your information, you are in reporting compliance. How you answer those questions is another issue. So if you reported that you conducted no audits on any of your district facilities, then you are reporting that you were not in compliance with that mandate. And the reason I bring that up is because the Texas School Safety Center does not analyze the data individually of each district, but aggregately. So any deficiencies that are reported to the center are reported in a summative manner that results in the final compilation of the district audit report. So it's really important that any clerical errors that are made upon submission that the district ensure to correct before they submit their final report. And that's one of the responsibilities of the district security committee team, is to make sure that all of those reports that come to the center are complete and accurate and are representative of the data that the district is wanting to submit to the center. Now, as I mentioned before, we are we're ending the second year of the current audit cycle. Now, the cycle began September 1 of 2011, and it will end August 31st of 2014. And the notifications, as I mentioned before, are going to begin in January 2014, and reporting will begin in April of 2014. So school districts are going to have until August 31st of next year to complete their audits, and we will allow them till September 15th to actually report those audit results to us for some districts who will be finishing up probably towards the end of the deadline. So the actual 2011 and 2014 DAR will be available in spring 2015. So when the reporting is closed, the Texas School Safety Center will begin to put the report together, analyze all the findings to make the report publicly available in 2015. And currently, the 2008-2011 District Audit Report can be found on our website, and I encourage those of you who haven't had the opportunity to look at it and to get an idea of what this report is about and what it entails and the kind of data that we will be reporting on. I would encourage you to look at that report. Now, I don't know if we will have any time for questions. I'd be happy to take any questions on the audit process, on the safety and security audits themselves. Are there any questions out there? I know it was a lot of information in a very short amount of time, but we're here to answer questions all year long. So.
Kathy, could you talk a little bit about the school safety standards?
Yes.
And explain what those are and how those came about?
Yes. The school safety standards, or the Texas Unified School Safety and Security Standards, were developed back in 2007, and they basically follow the framework of the 4 phases of emergency management. And the standards are recommendations for schools in the areas of school safety and security, and security. And you can actually find those standards on our website. One of the processes that we're in right now is developing best practices for each of those standards that schools can utilize in their own districts as they're meeting these safety and security initiatives. So right now, after each legislative year, the working group comes back together, which was actually stakeholders throughout the state, schools personnel that came together to develop these standards for school districts. So a lot of it had input from schools initially. So after this legislative session, we will come back together to revisit those standards and make adjustments as to any changes in the Chapter 37 that come about. But I would encourage districts to take the opportunity to look at what those standards are. They are on our website. And if you have any questions about them, do not hesitate to contact us. And I have my personal contact information here along with my colleague Tom Kelly, who is actually our safety and security audit specialist. So.
Thank you very much. Just a clarifying question that I have is, and I know you and I have talked about this on the phone before, the citations that are at the end of the safety school standards, could you kind of give a breakdown on how people can follow what those
Yes.
are? Because oftentimes
Yes.
there is some confusion because
Yes.
they think it's tied to legislation, and so they're going through the legislative book that
Right.
superintendents often get.
Right.
And so if you could explain that.
Well, the citations that accompany the standards, which is that a glossary also accompanies the standards as well to identify or define a lot of the terms that are in there. But the citations were sort of a foundation for where a lot of those standards came from. They're not exactly from word for word pulled from those particular pieces of legislation, but that's where the general idea came from. So as you're looking through the citations, keep that in mind. And, we try to update those after every legislative session to make sure that they're current. But they were based off documents that were put together as we were developing the standards. So does that answer your question?
Yes, ma'am. Thank
Okay.
you very much. Any other questions for Kathy regarding the safety and security audit process?
And I do want to say, and I would like to thank all of you out there for being such a huge part of a lot of the safety and security initiatives. Like I said, the audit reporting cycle is going to begin next year, and so we're here to help make this process as easy as possible for districts. So please do not hesitate to contact this Texas School Safety Center. If you have any questions, we're more than happy to walk you through the entire process if need be. So thank you again for helping to keep our school safe.
Excellent. Thank you, Kathy, for coming. Any other questions for Kathy? Going once? Going twice? All righty. Thank you, Kathy, for your time very much. I appreciate it. Thanks. And our next guest that we have with us is Alyssa Harold. She's the Farm to School Program Specialist with the Texas Department of Agriculture, and she has some information and a presentation that she would like to share as well. And let me get her presentation set up here. All right, Alyssa.
Perfect, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm here today to give you an overview of the Texas Statewide Farm to School Initiative, provide a little information on a grant currently available from USDA, and to provide some additional resources, website links, and my contact information, so that if you are interested in Farm to School or want to explore what Farm to School is and how it could fit into your school district, we can work through that. So first, in case you're not familiar with the term Farm to School and what that really means, here's just a brief overview. So Farm to School is everything from incorporating local products into school meals, whether you're purchasing that product directly from a local producer or from a produce distributor, for example. And then providing educational opportunities for students, so teaching them about that local food, whether that be through a school garden or a community garden, a cooking demonstration, providing taste testing, or some sort of classroom lesson. For example, taking students out to a local farm for a field trip. And the goal of Farm to School is establishing a positive relationship between students and local food. So I used the word local a couple times, and what does that even mean? A lot of people have different definitions for local, and what's great is in the school meal system, USDA allows whomever is purchasing that product to define local. So depending on where you're at in the state, you may have a lot of producers located in your county even. So you can define local as someone located in your county, or you can define it as a producers located within a particular mile radius of your school, or you could even define it as Texas product is local. And I put a link on this slide for the USDA policy on geographic preference that talks about local. That's definitely something good to reference or to have handy if and when you start procuring local product. When I talk about local, when the Department of Ag talks about local, we're looking at Texas products. We definitely support all Texas farmers and will help you find a Texas agricultural product near you. Now, we understand Texas is big, so breaking down the state into different regions is often the best way to accomplish things. So we look at a regional focus, but definitely within the entire state. Now, from a statewide perspective, Farm to School definitely isn't new. It wouldn't surprise me if there's several of you sitting, participating this morning who have been incorporating local product into school meals or teaching kids about gardening or the importance of purchasing local for years. That's definitely, it's been a very popular tool. However, statewide efforts didn't start until 2009. And what's so great is my job is taking the successes we've had in the state and expanding it statewide. Through the Department of Ag, we offer resources and networking opportunities for folks that are interested in either starting some aspect of Farm to School or expanding their Farm to School efforts. The resources are available for nutrition staff, teachers, producers, community members, anyone who's interested in incorporating these activities into the school. And the resources will help teach students where their food comes from and the importance of nutrition and agriculture. At TDA, our goals can pretty well be boiled up into these bullet points. Help schools incorporate farm to school activities, whether that be purchasing local product, starting a garden, organizing a field trip to a farm, whatever works best for the district or campus. We can look at it either way. Making those strong connections between a school interested in purchasing local product and a producer interested in selling their product to a local school, with the overall goal of increasing the amount of local product that are served in our school meals. So how can I help you start a farm to school program? I can give you some technical assistance, some resources, either email or phone, whatever's best for you, to first of all do a self-assessment. Look at, for example, what is your kitchen capacity at your school? Can you take in raw local lettuce, for example, and handle the processing, the cleaning, the chopping, making that lettuce ready to be served? And then once we've done a self-assessment to see kind of where you are, look at what is your goal? Are you trying to incorporate more local product? Do you want to work with your distributor to start carrying more local product? Do you want to start a garden? Once we determine your goals, what you want out of it, help you develop a plan, how to reach those goals, remembering always to start slow. One of the favorite terms in Farm to School is pilot project, always starting slow and seeing what works for a campus, a few campuses within a district, and then expanding district-wide. Once we've developed a plan, I could talk to you about who needs to be on the team to achieve what you lay out in the plan. What staff members at the school, what administration, should parents be involved? Is it a project where community members would be helpful? For example, if you're wanting to start a garden and you don't have a green thumb, for example, you don't need one. There are amazing master gardeners across the state who will help you, and they can be your experts to tell you what to plant, when to plant, that sort of thing. And then I can help you identify potential challenges and be ready to meet those. We have a lot of great success stories from across the state, and I can help you connect with someone who's had a successful gardening project, for example, so that you can learn what worked for them, and maybe some of the challenges they faced to help you be better prepared so it doesn't come as a surprise. At the beginning of my presentation, I mentioned some grant funding, and I hope everyone's ears perked up when I said that. USDA has a national farm to school staff, and part of their job is administering a grant program. There's specific money available for farm to school activities, and that's any activity. Purchasing local product, starting a garden, pretty well everything I covered at the beginning of this presentation. And that grant is currently open. USDA is accepting applications for that. And there are 3 categories for proposals within this grant program: planning grants, implementation, and support services. And what's so great about these 3 categories is, let's say, for example, you are at a district that doesn't have a garden program, but you would like to start one, and you'd like to find out what local products are even available in your area that could be incorporated into the menu. You would submit a planning grant. You want to have a comprehensive plan on how to start farm to school at your district. By submitting within that category, you are only going to be competing against other schools that are in that same situation, that are looking to plan out farm to school activities. On the flip side, let's say you're already incorporating local product into the school, you're offering taste testing, and you have one campus garden within the district, but you want to expand things to all of the elementary schools or elementary and middle school campuses. For that type of activity, you would submit an implementation grant. You are trying to implement more farm to school in your district. Again, when you submit in the implementation grant, you are only competing against other schools looking to implement more farm to school. Planning grants and implementation grants are only for school districts to apply. The third category, support services grants, would be for nonprofit organizations, state agencies, local agencies that want to provide support to the districts in their area for farm to school. So you won't ever, as a school, you won't ever be competing against a nonprofit for money. You'll just be competing against schools. You can see there the deadline is approaching, April 24th. There's definitely still time to submit a proposal. Talk to me about kind of some ideas. Talk to USDA about ideas. And USDA has 3 webinars available for information on this grant. Now, you might be looking at that saying, well, the first one was yesterday, and the second one is in 2 hours. How am I supposed to be able to participate in that? I list those because USDA is archiving the recordings of those webinars. So do not fear. You can look at the recordings at your convenience. And those webinars cover what's expected in each of the grant categories, what the proposal should cover, what the grant requirements are. For example, there is a match required. So how do you reach that match? And then also cover exactly what you need to do to submit the grant. It will be submitted online, so they talk about what website to submit that to and what information you need in order to submit the grant. So if you are interested in any way on submitting this grant, I definitely recommend going to access the archive of the particular webinar where for the grant category you would apply in. If you're not quite sure which grant category, my contact information will be up on the screen here in a few minutes. Call me, email me. We can figure out together what the best category would be for you, and then you'll kind of know where you sit. Additionally, here are some great farm to school resources that are available online for you. The first is the USDA Farm to School program. This has educational resources, success stories from other states, all sort of other links to other web resources. The National Farm to School Network is a national group of schools, advocacy groups, nonprofit organizations, all working to increase farm to school programs. So again, similar to the USDA website, a lot of resources for success stories, implementation models. So if you have an idea but you don't really know how to get from your idea to implementing something, there'll be an implementation model for you to read through. Again, there's the link to the USDA Farm to School grant page. And lastly, the Texas Ag in the Classroom lessons that many are in line with TEKS. So I know that's a very important, if you're incorporating something in the classroom, it needs to align. So beagsmart.org has some lesson plans for you to look at. So there's my contact information. Does everybody get these slides? Or access to them?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
The slides
perfect.
will be posted to the Texas Action for Healthy Kids website sometime next week. And we do have a question. One of our
Excellent.
webinar participants is wanting to know, if the school wants to check out getting a grant for a garden, which grant is it that they need to apply for?
Perfect. Great question. If you do not have anything at your school district for farm to school and you want to plan out how to have a garden, you would apply for a planning grant. If your outcome for that grant is a plan on how to start a garden program, you would apply in the planning grant. Now let's say you want to actually get money to implement a garden. You have an idea of how to start it, but you want money for soil, fertilizer, tools, hiring a consultant to plan out where your garden would be. And your end result would be a garden, then you would want to apply in the implementation category. So you would look at what is your end result. Do you want a plan? Do you want a comprehensive step-by-step what to do? Or do you actually want a garden, for example?
Excellent. Thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions for Alyssa?
And by all means, if you think of them later today, in a couple days, give me a call, send me an email. I'm happy to talk through what farm to school could mean for your campus or your district.
All righty. Thanks,
Perfect.
Alyssa. Appreciate
Thank you
it.
all.
Thank you for your time.
Perfect.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have our next presenter here that's with us today, Amy McChesney. She's with Ami McChesney. She's with Lamar Middle School, and she's going to talk to us about how does your garden grow. And she also has a presentation that I will set up here. All right. Ami.
Okay. So, right here? Okay,
Yes,
can
ma'am.
everyone hear me? Hi, I'm Ami McChesney. I'm so glad to be here to talk about our school garden. I'm with Lamar Middle School. I'm with Lamar Middle School, and this is a picture of our school garden taken about a month ago. The first few slides I have here are kind of general about, the initial stages of getting a school garden going. And then I'll be more specific in the last few slides about what we did and what worked for us. So some questions when you're first getting started, questions to consider are, why do you want a school garden? Who's going to approve, build, and maintain the garden? And where are you going to put it? So why do you want a school garden? There's always lots of reasons to have a school garden. Environmental awareness, encourage healthy eating preferences for students, model and teach social skills, provide a hands-on outdoor classroom, a teaching resource, get kids outside, interacting with nature, being active, and then also to foster connections with school and community. Our goals, and you can have more, several goals in mind. That's the great thing about a garden. Our goals initially were to increase nutritional awareness and to get kids outside and moving. And there were also some teachers who were interested in using the garden as a teaching tool. Next questions to consider are who's going to approve, build, and maintain the garden. Of course, some of the first steps you have to make are to get approval from your principal and district, reach out to the school administration, parents, teachers, cafeteria staff, facilities manager, custodians. These are all the people at the school who are going to help you with a successful garden program. And then you have people and groups on the community side that are also going to help you maintain and take care of your garden. So you want to reach out to neighborhood associations, master gardeners who can help you with the technical aspects of gardening, churches, volunteer groups, local businesses, and nonprofit organizations like Action for Healthy Kids or the Sustainable Food Center. And we also reached out to Keep Austin Beautiful. Another question to consider is, where's your garden going to be on the campus? You need sunlight, 6 to 8 hours at least, access to water, of course. Soil, are you going to use existing soil at your site, or are you going to buy soil? And then if you're going to be buying materials like soil and lumber or stone, is your site accessible for trucks and volunteers to come with wheelbarrows and all the things that you need to actually build the garden? And visibility, can your garden be seen? I find that if you have your garden in a spot that is in a nook or a cranny on the campus, it's not really seen by that many people, and it can tend to be neglected. But if your garden is somewhere where you walk by it every day, or where students can see it, they can see what's going on, it increases awareness and interest, and it's not so easy to forget about. And the purpose of what's the purpose of it? For us, we wanted to engage the students, but we also wanted to reach out to the community. If you're going to expect the community to help you with your garden, what are you going to offer in return? So we chose to have our garden site located in a place that was could be accessed by lots of people in the community. There's a track nearby, so people visit that area on the weekends. Parents come with kids. The bus stop is not too far away, so when kids go home from school, they see the garden on their way home or on their way to school. So those are some things to think about. Now the next few slides are just some of the lessons that we learned when we were doing our garden, and it's been going about 2 years now. So
start small with room to grow. It doesn't have to, you don't have to have a huge comprehensive plan. You can just start a pilot program. Just start out small, see how it goes. Take some lessons from that before you go crazy, you know. Get students and volunteers involved ASAP. So have a plan for getting people out there after it's built. How are you going to do that? Set your garden up for success. Use the garden to foster connections and relationships, and then expand as funds and interest increase and you've had a chance to kind of explore how it works with your school. So start small with room to grow. This is just a picture. This is one of the garden beds that we put in with Keep Austin Beautiful, and it's just a 4x4 kit that you buy at Home Depot. The 7th and 8th graders actually put it together. You can fit it in the back of your car. You can fit all the soil in the back of your car. So you could just, you know, start small. And let's see, get kids involved right away. When we first started our garden, we started out with 4 8 feet by 4 feet beds. So it wasn't a huge garden, but not too small either. But as you know, the school day is pretty structured, and there's not always a lot of time during the school day for people to get out there. So what we did was a parent and 2 parents and a teacher started an after-school club called we called it the GIY Club for Grow It Yourself. And this was just a club. It was open to all students, but we had about 15 to 20 kids participate the first year, and it met once a week after school. And that was perfect. Our garden was just the right size. The kids, you know, were able to grow a lot of food, and it really, I think it generated a lot of interest that first year. Now what we're doing is we've actually kind of expanded, the school has expanded the concept of a club day. And so there's lots of different clubs that the kids can choose from, garden club being one of them. And the clubs actually meet during the school day. They meet at the last 45 minutes of the day on Fridays. So we have there's about 10 or 20 kids that are participating. They can change clubs at the semester too. So they're not committed to the whole year. And so that's going real well. And also what we're doing this year is there's 3 culinary arts kids that are using classes that are using the garden, a group of 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. And so we've taken periodic trips out to the garden to work with them in the garden. And they're using the produce from the garden, onions, lettuce, and things like that we've been growing. They're using in their class. And then the other thing that we did was to tap into community programs and resources. We used, for example, the Clean Creek Campus program with Keep Austin Beautiful. They actually come out to your classroom. They have lesson plans. There's different ones you can choose from, but they're aligned with the state curriculum, and they will do the classes for you and bring the material. So they did. This was on green gardening, so the culinary arts students learned about green gardening, and then it ended with a project in the garden. The picture on the left is the first student, our pilot program, the GIY Club last year. And then the bottom picture is us using lettuce from the garden. We're making a salad for a family event night at school. And we're also making salad dressing. We used herbs that we were growing in the garden as well. Yeah. Some other things we did, last year we took the kids on a field trip to 5 Mile Farms, which was a little farm just down the street from Lamar. Other things you can do or have guest speakers or visitors come to your campus. Lots of things. Set the garden up for success. So you want to, it's a manageable size for the people that you have interested in it. Right season, right plants. Get volunteers. You don't have to have volunteers with some experience, but it does help. And you'll find that most gardeners are pretty generous with their time. And especially at the beginning, if you're not familiar with where or what plants to buy and where to get them, that does help. And Also, oh yeah, it is very important to remember that gardening is a process. It's never complete. It's a practice. So don't feel like it's kind of, yeah, that's all I can say. It's not complete. It's always changing, and it's a process, and that's what I like about it, because you're not bound to one idea.
And Ami, I do have a question. What, as far as what do you do during the summers? Do they rotate, or do they sign up for shifts to maintain the garden during the summer?
Well, there's a couple ways you can approach that. If you don't have a lot of people, we've done a couple things. You don't be tied to gardening during the summer. I mean, here in Texas in the summer is like the dead of winter in Alaska. It's just not the time to be outside. So you could plant summer cover crops if you wanted. You could just kind of by the end of June, plants are pretty petered out. So you can just have some, 1 or 2 work days where you try to keep things under control. We had a facility. This is also when school staff come in handy. Our facilities manager had some background in agriculture, and he, I guess being on campus anyway, would come out and turn the drip hoses on and water the garden. So we actually had things growing during the summer, believe it or not. But you don't have to be tied to that. It just depends on what works with your program.
And then what about expense for starting the program?
Well, like, it could be as expensive or as cheap as you want it to be. It depends. If you don't have a lot of funds, then just start small with a few kits. We had some funds from Action for Healthy Kids to do the 4 raised beds that we put in initially. And then for setting up the site, all we did was we laid cardboard down on top of the grass and got free mulch delivered from, I think, the district or the city had a thing. So it doesn't have to cost that much. The soil was donated, so by Organics by Gosh, they donated the soil for the first garden too. Or you can just start small with the kit. All right, and a maintenance plan. So with the garden maintenance, what we do is we have 2 or 3 kind of big work days, and that's great for reaching out to big organizations like Keep Austin Beautiful, like the Rotary Club, parents, people that could come out, not all the time, but just once in a while. And then what we've also done is to set up a Sign Up Genius account, and so that goes out to the neighborhood listservs. It goes out to the school newsletter, email newsletter, and so it's kind of like 2 hours. What we do is we have a couple Saturdays about twice a month, and it's for 2 hours. So it doesn't have to be a continual thing. You can just sign up and come. It's a very limited time commitment. You're not signing up for any big thing. So that's great for volunteers who want to help, but they don't want to be in charge. Let's see. Oh yeah, use the garden in different ways. You want to foster connections and relationships. So our garden, it's a resource for teachers, obviously, and we've got some of the obvious applications are life sciences, but there's a lot more possibilities. We're using it in the culinary arts classes. Some of the art students have gone out there. They were studying an artist who did sculptures out of natural objects. So they had gone out there and done these little mini sculptures all around the garden. I think the English language arts kids have used it for some. Mainly it's been the garden club and the culinary arts kids, but there are classes that are going out there and using it for different things. And I think as we're building awareness and people are getting more comfortable with it, that is increasing. We used it during our catch night, which was our family fun and fitness event last year. We've got composting going on in the cafeteria and the garden. Lamar and Small, I think, are one of the first couple of middle schools in AISD to do composting. And we've got farm to school going in the cafeteria, so our school garden ties in real well with that. And then we have a culinary arts and then community. Oh, since our first goal was really to reach out to the community as well, we want to use the garden for education purposes as well. And that's not happened yet, but it is definitely in our to-do list. So here's some pictures of what we had going on. That's our catch night display and on the left, and we had lots of, those were vegetables that we actually had growing out in our garden. Our cafeteria manager on the bottom right, she's been great. She's been willing to work with us on lots of initiatives. We have, you know, the composting in the cafeteria. We're doing farm to school. So this is a picture of her talking to the 7th grader culinary arts class on farm to school, telling them about the program and giving them a sample list of the things that she was going to be able to order, and kind of encouraging them to tell their friends about it, to look for the little signs that on the food line that point out which foods are grown locally. And then there's a picture of our compost in the garden, and then our compost in the cafeteria. And we also had a farmer visit also, which was real fun. And then as funds increase and interest increases, then expand. And consequently, it's usually easier to get more funds too. So now what we've done, what's worked for us, is that we've tripled in size since we started our garden. We had 10 to 20 students directly involved. Last year, we were working with at least 100 kids. Not every day, but over the year. This year, 100 kids have been directly involved. And we got a significant Lowe's grant this year for some more improvements in the garden. So storage shed, tools, drip irrigation. Since it's grown, the watering system is going to be definitely more challenging. And then we're going to put in 3 new beds. And here's a couple of resources that you can use. There's lots. These are some that really were helpful for us. The Sustainable Food Center has a Sprouting Healthy Kids after school program, and they also have lesson plans that you can use. And Keep Austin Beautiful has kits that you can check out. And they have a Clean Creek campus program where they actually come out and do lessons in your classroom. And I was going to mention also on that, I forgot to write this on the slide, but the Travis County Master Gardeners website has a kit called From Broccoli to Butterflies, and has it's just a mini lesson plan on doing a fall garden, which if you don't want to be gardening in the summer, then just garden in the fall. So that's real helpful. And it's also much more pleasant to get your garden started in the fall. And that's it. Please let me know if you have any questions.
Thanks, Tom. We appreciate that very much. Does anybody have any questions?
It's really complete. Lots of good information.
Any questions out there? Well, I mean, I greatly appreciate it. One of the things that I'd like to share is my father-in-law has a garden, and my kids are 4 and 2. And last weekend we planted onions and potatoes, and they went bonkers for it. So you know, it's also a great fun family event to do because you're spending time with family, and they're learning about how to grow their own food, and to start that process early as well. And I guess, no pun intended, but plant the seed early, I guess, would be what to take
You just
away.
plant one little seed and
What to take away from that.
Yeah.
But they go crazy for it. I think my son's more excited about getting to digging dirt and playing the dirt than the actual process. But I think he'll learn it eventually. But I just wanted to share that because I think it ties in. You know, if you start it early enough, then that's something that they can start asking at their school when they get to school age to start doing those kinds of things.
Definitely.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thanks, Ami. Appreciate it. If anybody doesn't have any questions, we will go ahead and move on to Miss Anita Wheeler now. She's going to provide us an update on the new guidelines for lice. I know that that has been a pretty hot topic. I've been receiving phone calls about it, and I know has received several different phone calls about it. So I will go ahead and turn this over to her to give us an update.
Well, good morning. We have received many phone calls since the rules changed back in December related to pediculosis. The rules have now changed to indicate that children do not have to be sent home if they have head lice, and so we're going to talk a little bit about that this morning. I guess one thing that as I'm hearing all these gardeners talk about gardens, I just got a text message from my husband, and he said we had babies, and I knew what he was talking about because I'm too old to have babies. But he was talking about all of our little seed sprouts had started to sprout up. So I am one of those garden folks. I'm a little bit too old to get out in the field and get on my hands and knees, but one thing we do is we do a container garden, and so it was really exciting to hear this morning people that had like minds about fresh fruits and vegetables. So as we go forward, let me kind of give you an update on why the guidelines were changed or why the rules were actually changed. The Center for Disease Control, Harvard School of Public Health, the National Association of School Nurses, and the American Academy of Pediatrics have had position statements out for quite a few years indicating that although pediculosis and head lice are a nuisance, they really aren't vectors of disease. And when you look at the communicable disease chart, most of the conditions that are on that communicable disease chart are things that cause illness and things that create opportunities for infectious diseases to spread amongst individuals. For the nurses in the audience, I'd just like to let you know that the National Association of School Nurses does have a position statement on pediculosis in the school setting. I was not able to pull down that article or any of the supporting documents that they have because it's copyrighted and it's only available for NASN members. But what I did pull down, and hopefully you'll have access to, is an article that was put out by the American Academy of Pediatrics in the Journal of the American Academy of Pediatrics. And much of what was done at the state level to make that change was done due to these guidelines. As I said before, head lice is no longer a required excludable condition. Schools may adopt administrative regulations that are different than what this requirement is at the state level. And for schools out there that actually utilize TASB services, they utilize TASB as their policy developer. We've actually talked to the Texas Association of School Boards, and what they're going to be doing for school districts is they're going to be drafting language that will be placed in the model student handbook. And these are the administrative regulations. These are not actually district policies, but these are more along the lines of district regulations that schools may want to consider for adoption. I think the one thing that we have to be very careful of is if children are sent home from school, they miss valuable time in the classroom. And as you read some of the articles that are available recently, because head lice are more of a nuisance, and sometimes children get stigmatized because they've got the problem. I think it's real important that we try to focus in on educating parents as to what is an issue and what is not. As I said before, the National Association of School Nurses has a position statement on this. The position statement itself is something that the general public has access to, and if you'll go on the NASN website, you can pull down their position statement, and it pretty much outlines that children should not be excluded from school because there should not be a disruption in the educational process. There are no diseases associated with head lice, although we do know that they can be quite a nuisance. The thing that they really support is doing a lot of education about teaching parents to discourage children from having close, direct head-to-head contact. And I think one of the things that we see as children get older, there's less and less direct contact. So you don't see head lice infestation in children once they get a little bit older. Although I do have to tell you a story. We talk about sharing items. My daughter had this really cute bolo hat in middle school, and she decided she wanted to wear it to school. And I said, Brianna, you better watch it. That hat will disappear. Well, it did for a couple class periods, and when she got it back, she also got a few little bugs. And so we were on vacation on our way up to see my sister in Colorado, and lo and behold, she had a pediculosis situation. And so here I was at my sister's house in Colorado with head lice. So as you can tell, the biggest thing is trying to teach folks about close direct contact head to head, but also sharing of personal items that could be on the head. So I think that's where you'll see that the American Academy and the NASN positions are really pointing towards educating the parents and making sure that they're aware. There is a really good article that was in the NASN School Nurse back in 2011. And it was an article that was written by a school nurse, who actually went about changing the head lice policy to allow children to stay in school and go home in the afternoon and be treated in the evening. And she would work with the parents to get them to understand what appropriate treatment was, so that when they came back to school the next day, they would have been successfully treated. Here's a little note that I found while I was, kind of updating myself on this. By the time a child has the symptoms of having those cute little bugs, they've had them for at least 3 to 4 weeks. So sending them home one afternoon really hasn't changed much, because quite frankly, they've already been in the classroom for 3 or 4 weeks with these pediculosis. And so that was kind of the statement by both of those organizations, that, we have to focus in on educating parents. I know many schools are going to continue to do what they've done. I think the one thing that the Texas Association of School Boards warned us about, and kind of told us that we needed to be aware of, is that really when children are sent home, it can't really count against their credit. And so I would encourage school districts to speak with their legal counsel and their attendance folks as it relates to attendance, and as it relates to what you need to do when children have pediculosis, and either your policy says to send them home, or you want to rework your policy to where it keeps more students in school.
Anita,
Yes.
we have one of our webinar participants would like to know that is it recommended that letters be sent home to parents if the infected student is in the same classroom?
The best evidence for that particular practice is that it's not necessary to notify the entire school classroom that one child has pediculosis. Now, if you see that there is a repeated situation in a classroom, that there are numerous children, then you have to really make that decision based on a case-by-case basis. But it is not recommended that there be universal screenings. It is not recommended that that letters go home to parents if there is just one child with head lice in a classroom. However, if you see a trend that there are more and more children, then of course you might want to notify the parents in that classroom to check their children, and then educate them on the appropriate treatment protocols that would help decrease the number of children who were affected by the situation. One of the articles that we actually provided to Michelle was that article on from the American Academy of Pediatrics. And I think this article itself kind of talks about the different treatment modalities that need to be considered. Certainly working with your healthcare professionals to determine what the appropriate treatment is. The American Academy always recommends over-the-counter first. But then again, we do have some resistant little head lice bugs that aren't always responsive to a treatment. So again, you want to work with the healthcare professionals in your area to come up with the best strategies on how to work with this very nuisance situation, but also in making sure that children are getting treatment but not over treated.
At what point do you notify parents? Is there a percentage or a number that you go by?
I think it's a case by case basis. I would say if you've got a classroom of 22 students and you have 4 or 5 students that do have, the pediculosis, then you might want to start considering 4 or 5 students. Okay, that's enough. I would think that another strategy, it's not enough just to notify parents, but you have to start looking at that classroom environment. Are the coats being hung together? Although the school is usually not the location where most of the infestation occurs. Most of the infestation occurs at the home. But again, you have to start looking at the environment at the school. Are the coats being hung together? Are children being laid down at nap time where they have head-to-head contact? You have to kind of start looking. If you've got that many students, then you want to do both. You want to notify parents to check their children, give them appropriate information on treatment, but then also you want to look at what is the condition in the classroom. What can we be doing to help make sure that it's not being passed in the classroom setting.
And also, as a school nurse, another question that we have as a school nurse, how do you handle a child that continually has pediculitis once or twice a month on a regular basis?
Again, that goes back to treatment, and it also goes back to helping educate the parents. I can assure you, we get this phone call probably once a month, if not 5 times a month, of parents who continually either send their children to school with head lice, or the treatment just doesn't seem to be working. And again, this is where you really have to work with your healthcare professionals. If you've got a resistant strain and everything you've tried up to this point has not worked, then you want to work with a healthcare professional to see what else needs to be done. I would like to give you an example of something that was discovered when folks started working together to really kind of identify a situation that was making this occur. There was a child that kept coming continually, just they could not eradicate the head lice. And when they went in and investigated further, they realized that this child was homeless, and this child was living in their automobile with 4 other family members. And so there were bigger social issues that needed to be addressed, because there's no way in the world that you're going to get 4 people in a car eradicated of head lice, and there's a much bigger social issue that probably needed to be addressed. If you've got parents who, and I've heard this before, where children are coming to school with literally scabs in their head from scratching and really creating a health issue. I know that Child Protective Services usually will not respond to a head lice situation, but you still have to look at it from the perspective of, I've done everything I can to educate the parent. I've tried to work with them to get this done. I've worked with healthcare professionals. We're still with a problem. Then as a last resort, then I would call Child Protective and ask them what they think could be done to help this situation.
And that would be based along the lines of medical neglect or something.
It
to that
could be,
extent?
but you can't always assume that, because as I said, when you've got a family of 4 living in an automobile, that the parents can't eradicate it in a car. So I think you have to look at it case by case. You always have to do the educational piece as much as you can, working with your local healthcare providers to try to come up with the best strategies. I know this article from the American Academy of Pediatrics, it kind of has a step-by-step. If this doesn't work, then go to this. If this doesn't work, then go to this. So I think you really have to work collaboratively as a community to figure out how to help those students who have persistent head lice problems.
And we have two webinar questions from our participants, and I think that we just addressed that. Their question is, what do you do when the parents just absolutely refuse to do anything about it, and you can see visually see they've got it crawling in their hair, on their clothes, to where it's that serious of an issue. And I think we just addressed that by, as a last resort, you would want to call Child Protective Services to see, what are my options here, or what can be done, or what's the next step in this process.
Correct. And I think this is also something that you would want to address through your administrative regulations. Looking at, okay, how do we communicate to parents that at some point we're going to have to step in and say, your child really cannot come to school until they have had this addressed. I think your administrative regulations need to clearly state exactly what those parameters are. And I think, too, you just have to work as best you can. Some children are going to be perpetual, and if this is going to be an issue. And it's very hard to eradicate. Once there's a lot of them, I think that's what the AAP article talks about, is that you want to eradicate as early as you can, because once they infest to the point where they're literally crawling off one child's healthy head and moving to another child's healthy head, that's when you really have an issue. So I would suggest that you really go back to that educational piece. I know that one of the slides, the one that's up right now, talks about our head lice fact sheets. The Department of State Health Services has individual fact sheets that talk about the different aspects of pediculosis infestation. We are in the process of updating that. I believe we finally gotten the website updated to where the current rule is up there. We're going to reformulate some of our information so that it's more educational towards parents, although I think that lice fact sheets right now are pretty geared towards parents. But we'll be looking at what other educational information we can help provide schools so that they in turn can turn around and teach the parents about how to eradicate head lice.
And then another question, and I figured this was going to be a very sensitive, hot topic
Yeah.
today. In regards to dealing with parents, when you're trying to address the issue with parents, and the parent or parents become, or just a caregiver in general, it could be that the child's with grandma and grandpa, depending on what circumstances are. But how would you deal with an irate parent that just kind of gets out of control over you trying to address the issue repeatedly because you're trying to get it eradicated?
I think the benefit of putting things in administrative regulations, it gives the school district, if it's in administrative regulations, you have the community has kind of had input into that document, or if not, at least the school district legal counsel has really addressed some of those issues. At some point, we can do all kinds of things to help educate parents, but sometimes when it's a repetitive situation, you have to really go and look at what other types of strategies can work. And again, I would always go back to what do your administrative regulations say. I would talk to the school district attendance clerks to see what types of situation you can work out with them. But I would always make sure that you talk to your school district's legal counsel, because children are, they have the right to a free and appropriate public education. So it's a very fine line. And now that the rule is gone, there's really not a whole lot for school districts to stand on other than their administrative regulations that they develop with input from their legal counsel, and for those school districts who belong to Texas Association of School Boards, they will give you some guidance documents. So I think it's all about education. Head lice is not something new. It's been around for centuries. We just should be thankful they're not body lice, because back in the 1800s, that was the big problem. So I think we just work together. If there's some type of resource that the Department of State Health Services can give you or provide to you, please email me and let me know, because we really are going to try to get some good parental focused resources so that school districts can work with this, because we do know it's a very difficult problem, and sometimes it does make for a very big challenge to try to make sure children are in school and healthy, and that is our primary goal.
Since it's recommended not to exclude but to notify parents at the end of the day, what would you would you recommend having the parent bring the student in through the nurse's office the next day to recheck the student before the student is allowed to return to class?
Most of the documents that I have shared with you this morning do state that there needs to be some kind of a mechanism for the student to be rechecked as they come back in. And so if, for the schools that don't have a school nurse, designating somebody to kind of do that little head check before, which in turn, you have to consider that if you haven't been trained in how to check for head lice, that's a whole nother issue of education. When you look for head lice, they don't like the light, and the minute you lift up the hair at the base of the neck, they're going to run all different directions. So I think it's really important that people be trained on what to check. If it's not the school nurse who's checking for this, then having somebody who's trained to check it. I think, again, it goes back to your administrative regulations. What process do you want to put in place that if children aren't going to be sent home till the end of the day, what process are you going to use helping them re-enter on the next day, making sure that all the live lice are gone?
And with that, when we're talking about regulations and making reference to local district policy, could a school district make a local policy regarding this, and would that override what the state is saying as far as not to excuse, not to dismiss or exclude from school?
A school district can always write policies and administrative regulations that are more restrictive than what the law requires. I would make sure that if you do that, you work through legal counsel, you work it for those districts who actually belong to the Texas Association of School Boards, working with them, communicating with their policy writers to make sure that you also are within the framework of attendance and making sure that children are not prohibited and it impacts their credit. So school districts always have they can always write policy that is more restrictive. They can always write administrative regulations that govern this. And many schools, we have heard many schools are going to continue to do what they've always done. They just will not have a law saying that the children must be excluded. So I would definitely, work this through the process, because this is definitely a hot topic. We've heard both sides of it. And I think we want to make sure that education is the key to all of this. All right,
We
so
have a question.
sure.
Sorry. Our question is regarding, can you clarify just a little bit about what you were saying about attendance and how the credit could go or not?
This is something that I was talking to the Texas Association of School Boards about. If a child is getting close to the situation where their attendance is impacting their ability to get credit for being in school, you have to be very careful, because there is not a requirement now from the state that they be excluded. And if that absentee, or if that child being absent that day impacts their credit or their ability to earn credit, you have to be extremely careful, because it is not a state requirement anymore that they be excluded. So that's why you need to work very closely with whoever writes your district administrative regulations, who works with your attendance folks, so that you don't step over that boundary. It's not something I'm really familiar with. I actually was talking with the Texas Association of School Boards, but definitely, because it's not a requirement from the state that they be excluded anymore, and for some reason you exclude them, if it impacts their ability to get credit for coursework, that has to be considered in the exclusion. So that's a new one on me, and so certainly I would definitely talk to the folks who write your administrative regulations and who work with the school districts on their policy development, and attendance folks. On The PowerPoint slide, yes.
Good. The Texas Department of Health Services, are they gonna remove it from their communicable disease chart as well?
Yes, actually, that's kind of the next thing I'm going to talk about. It is already off the chart. For those of you who have an older chart, that chart's no longer in effect. There are items that have been removed from that, and there have been changes to the fever part of that as well. So the chart, from what I understood, the chart is going to be sent out to all superintendents in the state. Once I know when that chart has been sent out, I will let you all know that it has been sent out. But then also we'll try to figure out a way to get you more copies, because I think right now, if the superintendent is the only one getting a copy of the chart, I'm not sure how many they're sending the superintendent. And we do know that most school nurses need one in their offices. I have a copy of the preliminary, but I don't have a final copy of what that looks like. Very good question. Thank you. In the PowerPoint presentation, I did put a link to the Texas Administrative Code where all of the new communicable diseases are now listed. They have made some changes related to head lice, obviously, has been removed. There are some changes to what is considered fever. Fever is now 100.0, not 100.4. And so that will be reflected in the administrative code as well. But I do have a link here for you.
And Anita, what was the chart? I think it was the communicable diseases chart is what you were referencing just a minute ago. Okay.
Correct. The communicable disease chart, the last time it was updated, I believe, was in 2003. Once they changed the communicable disease rules, which is what you see here under Texas Administrative Code, they had to go back and change the chart. So the chart should be, they told me it was going to be late January, early February, but I still haven't heard whether or not the chart is ready. So I will try to check on that and get information out through this system as soon as I can. I just didn't get a word back from the people that were in charge of the chart before I left yesterday. Okay, any other questions for me on head lice?
We have a go ahead.
Anita?
Yes.
I've noticed several of the, on the Texas Department of Health Services website, several of your life fact sheets begin with, it's the law. It's the law. Are they gonna fix that?
We're gonna fix all of those. We're gonna fix all of those. Yes. Because it's no longer in rule, we have to go back, we have to take all of those sheets, we have to take them down, we have to fix them. And so, yes, that's kind of next on the list of things to do. Have another one?
I do have a few questions from the webinar. Again, another one regarding exclusion. If you can't exclude them and they keep continually coming back, how do you, I think we've already answered that as far as what to do in that certain situation.
Exactly. You go back to, working with your local healthcare providers, looking at what is in your administrative regulations. If it gets to the point where, possibly a discussion with Child Protective, I would think those would be the extreme cases where there was just absolutely no headway with the parents. You'll always want to get the parents involved and trying to support the child as best you can. So I would say definitely make sure that you have that pretty much laid out in your administrative regulations. This is what we're going to do, so that parents, when they sign off on that student handbook, they know that that's what's going to happen.
And someone that's not a nurse but wants to get training about head lice or information about head lice, where would they need to go?
They could probably contact Ellen Smith, who is one of my coworkers at the Department of State Health Services. Or if you need to send me an email, just send me a quick email, and then I can forward it to Ellen. We do have, several of these articles we'd be happy to share. I think the biggest is looking at that document from the American Academy of Pediatrics. It's a very comprehensive document. I know that they don't recommend school-wide or even class-wide screenings anymore, simply because they're not cost-effective, and it really ties up a lot of staff time. But if you do have a classroom where you see 3 or 4 or 5 cases, it may not be a bad idea to just do a quick screening of the class, but only in extreme cases would I ever recommend that.
Can a student be put in a different room separated from other students?
I don't think that would ever be considered a situation that would be, if certainly it's not evidence-based practice. Limiting head-to-head contact is important. So it may be that coats are hung in a different place, or hats and scarves. Nap time is certainly a time when the little bitty ones have head-to-head contact. But to exclude a student from a classroom because of pediculosis, with there not being a requirement that they be excluded, could certainly be crossing the line.
And best way for people to reach you, your contact information.
Oh, I'm
that's been
sorry.
asked.
I usually put it on every single slide, and I didn't this time. Let me give you my email address. It's Anita, ANITA, .Wheeler, WHEELER, at D as in dog, S as in Sam, H as in house, S as in Sam, .state, .tx, .us.
And we have a comment here from one of our webinar participants. They actually received the communicable disease chart a couple of weeks ago.
Okay, so
and
it's out
still,
already.
And it's still the 2004 version.
Okay, that's not the new one then.
Where it says that it's still pediculosis is still on it.
Okay, that is not the new chart. The new chart will be dated probably December 2012 or January 2013. We anticipate that chart will go to your superintendent. As soon as I find out where that chart is, as far as its process, I will let you all know, either through Barney or through the Friday Beat. Any way we can get that information out to you so that you can get the most current chart, because yes, a 2004 chart is no longer the appropriate chart. You need to be using the new one, but if it's not available to you, we'll get it to you as soon as we can.
And we do have someone that's had quite a bit of experience with this, and they wanted to let the participants know that CPS will not come out and do anything regarding head lice at all. And then the last question that we have so far, they'd like to know if Ellen does training on how to check for lice, and are there steps to the process and those kinds of things to follow.
Ellen doesn't do training on how to check, although that might be a good thing that we might want to consider in the development. I'll write myself a note. If we could put together some type of a picture, maybe a PowerPoint, how to do a head check, understanding that, once you train someone, they can pretty well, there's several different ways. You can actually do a comb through. There are actually lice combs that you can use. So we will take that information back and see what we can do to maybe put up some information on how to do a check. And that actually would be a great part to have for the parents as well, because sometimes parents don't know that most head lice are going to be back in the back, along the back part of your head. You notice I have my hair up in a ponytail. It's because I've been dealing with head lice for 2 days. But anyway, it's usually in the back of the neck, and it's up around the ears is where you'll notice them most. And so I think that would be a very good idea, and we certainly will take that piece of information back and see if we can't come up with some kind of a resource to help parents understand how to do an appropriate check on their children's head.
And another suggestion that we just had is maybe developing a checklist on what to follow or what step comes next.
Okay, that'd be an awesome idea.
In the process.
Awesome idea.
Are there any questions from the service centers for Anita?
If not, thank you very much. I'm kind of glad we got head lice out of the way. Hopefully the next TETN I can talk about something fun. But we knew this one was really important because we knew that policy just was changed, or that rule was just changed, and we knew that there were many questions. And so thank you for listening. Feel free to contact me if you have any suggestions as to how we can help make more parent materials available to you. Thank you.
All right. Next, we have Melissa Dozier with the Department of Agriculture, and she's going to talk to us about the USDA's proposed rules on competitive foods. And let me pull up her presentation. Melissa, I'll let you come over and introduce yourself. And
good morning, everyone. Thanks for introducing me, Barney. My name is Melissa Dozier. I'm with Texas Department of Agriculture. And I just want to take a little bit of time today to go over the USDA proposed rule. As I'm sure most of you guys know, that the proposed rule was submitted on February 8th. And it you are able to submit comments until April 9th. So if you guys are interested in submitting comments to USDA on the rule, you can do so on the Federal Register, and that website is just thefederalregister.gov, and you'll be able to submit comments there. I encourage you all to submit comments if you're interested. USDA does look at every single comment submitted, so if you do have an opinion, feel free to share it. TDA will be consulting with our stakeholder group, Healthy Students Equals Healthy Families, to propose recommendations regarding the Texas Public School Nutrition Policy and what aspects of that policy need to be changed in light of the new proposed rule. That process will likely take a while. It'll probably be several years before this proposed rule is actually effective and required in all school districts. But once that time comes, we'll be consulting with them to get their input on the process. The PowerPoint that I'm going to go over with you all does a comparison of the Texas Public School Nutrition Policy compared to the proposed rule. I encourage you all to actually read the proposed rule, but I think this will give you a good baseline to understand what the rule will be requiring. Okay. So first up, when we look at the Texas Public School Nutrition Policy, it expressly limits the portion size of certain food items. Those include chips, crackers, popcorn, bakery items. And in the USDA proposed rule, portion sizes are not expressly prohibited. However, there are calorie restrictions that the USDA proposed rule will have on individual food items, which may indirectly affect the portion size of food items offered. And you will see that throughout these slides that USDA focuses on the nutrient content of food items as opposed to TPSMP, which more focuses on specific food items. TPSMP does not address whole grain content, but the proposed rule will require that all grain products served have at least 50% more whole grain or have whole grain as the first ingredient. Again, TPSMP does not address calories, but the USDA proposed rule does. It will limit snack items to 200 calories per portion. It'll limit entrees to 350 calories per portion. When it comes to fat, TPSMP has several requirements related to fat. The most stringent requirement being that no single food item can have more than 23 grams of fat. Additionally, total fat in chips and cookies and pastry items are also restricted. And additionally, deep fat frying as a method of on-site preparation is prohibited. The USDA proposed rule just limits total fat content to no more than 35% of total calories. When we look at saturated fat, again, TPSMP just restricts saturated fat in certain food items, and it also eliminates deep fat frying as a method of on-site preparation, which would affect the saturated fat in food items. The USDA proposed rule limits saturated fat to no more than 10% of calories. And when we look at trans fat, TPSMP is rather general. It just requires that there is a reduction of trans fat. It doesn't specifically require a certain amount of trans fat to be in items. The USDA proposal restricts trans fat to 0 grams of trans fat, which is less than 0.5 grams per nutritional label. Also, when it comes to sugar, TPSMP limits the amount of sugar in flavored milk and juice, and sugar may not exceed 10 grams per ounce in certain bakery and cookie items. The USDA proposed rule is proposing 2 alternatives related to sugar. One is limiting sugar based on the amount of calories in the food item. The other is limited to the amount of sugar based on the weight of the food item. When it comes to sodium or salt, TPSMP does not address sodium, but the USDA proposed rule limits snack items to have no more than 200 milligrams of sodium and entrees no more than 480 milligrams. When we talk about beverages, we see a lot of similarities between the USDA proposed rule and TPSMP. Both allow plain water to be served to students or sold to students. Milk is allowed in both policies. USDA proposed rule limits fat content to 1% or fat-free and also restricts the portion size of those items. Both policies allow milk alternatives to be served. And both policies also allow 100% fruit and vegetable juice to be served. TPSMP and the proposed rule differ a little bit on the portion sizes of those juices, but they are both allowed under both rules. When it comes to carbonated water, which would be calorie-free carbonated water, USDA is proposing that those items be allowed in high school. So here we're really talking about diet sodas. In TPSMP, no carbonated beverages are currently allowed. Also, USDA is proposing that other caffeinated or non-caffeinated beverages can be served. So those would include sweet teas, electrolyte beverages, a myriad of different beverages. They would only be allowed at the high school level. Currently in TPSMP, there are no electrolyte beverages that can be served in elementary schools. TPSMP also addresses the school environment. So specifically when it comes to fundraisers, TPSMP limits all competitive food, beverages, and snacks, including fundraiser items, to specific times during the day depending on the grade level. USDA is proposing that states or USDA may set a limit on the frequency of exempted fundraising activities that are conducted during the school day. And these fundraisers would only deal with fundraisers that sell food items. These wouldn't have any restrictions on non-food item fundraisers. When it comes to exemptions, TPSMP does allow each school campus to establish 3 exemption events. So a lot of you, I'm sure, will see like Valentine's Day or Christmas will have exempt days where unhealthy food items may be served. The USDA proposed rule does not address these exemptions and would, in theory, not be allowed under USDA. Also, I just wanted to touch on foods of minimal nutritional value. For anyone that doesn't know, these are considered by USDA to be carbonated beverages and certain candy items, so marshmallows, hard candies, things like that. They have not been allowed for many years, but USDA's proposed rule would actually get rid of the definition of foods of minimal nutritional value. The thought behind that is that USDA is, because they're outlining specific nutrient standards for food items, that this more narrow definition of foods of minimal nutritional value would no longer be needed. And other than that, that is it.
Excellent. Are there any questions from the service centers for Melissa? I do have a webinar question. Someone wants to know what about carbs for diabetic kids that are on carb insulin? rations, and they end up having to take a lot of insulin because most of the lunch plates are loaded with carbs, but don't cut down on other items.
So these rules only address those foods that are sold. So if we're talking about a diabetic student that is purchasing a meal as part of the National School Lunch or School Breakfast program, those meals are, again, the restrictions of what is served in those meals are required by USDA. However, if a student has a doctor's note that explains that they have a disability and have a special need related to that, then the schools are required to offer an alternate meal for that student.
And then regarding foods of minimal nutritional value, question just came up. A lot of nurses oftentimes will give out peppermints or something for coughing or sore throat.
Right.
So is that going to be excluded, included in those regulations?
Currently in TPSMP, nurses are exempt from foods of minimal nutritional value, so they are currently allowed to serve those items as they see fit. In terms of USDA's proposed rule, they don't address whether nurses would be exempt from that, but that would be a good point later on to get clarified from USDA.
Excellent. Any other questions from service centers for Melissa? All right, Melissa, thank
Okay.
you very much for your time.
Sure thing.
I appreciate it very much. All right, in wrapping up, just a couple of things I want to clarify. One is that Michelle Smith, I'd like to thank her for being behind the scenes in Texas Action for Healthy Kids, helping out with the webinar portion of this TETN, and a recording of the webinar as well as the handouts and PowerPoints will be posted to the Texas Action for Healthy Kids website probably sometime next week. And the link for that information, I believe, was on the, I don't know if that was on the agenda or not, but that's where you can go to look at that information. And then just an update that I have, I received notification yesterday that at any day now, hoping that any day now means sometime this next week or this week, that a letter to the administrator addressed is going to go out about the school health survey for this year. The legislative process has kind of taken precedence in that letter getting out any earlier. But I did receive notification yesterday that at some point any day now there will be a letter that's sent out, and that survey is due back April the 12th. Is the due date to have that survey submitted. And those are the only two updates that I have. Does anybody have any questions for me regarding anything? I will take silence as a no. And thank you for participating today. I hope you find the information was beneficial. And if there aren't any questions for me, have a nice rest of the week and take care.
I'm glad you're doing okay. Yeah, good. I'm sure I heard, but yeah, it's power through. Yeah. All right. Well,
Thank you for being flexible.
yeah, sure.